And what is happening out there, Roto Scouts basketball fans? Been a minute. Couple missed days at the end of the week last week. Chaotic basketball slates grinding me down to a nub. Missed a couple shows there. Hope you guys did well. Projections all over the place. No problems as far as getting the numbers together. But it's just been really difficult lately to jump on, talk about all this stuff, knowing that it's going to be irrelevant, knowing it's all going to change. Felt like the last couple days last week, a little bit better to be on top of things as far as updates, staying on top of the news goes. Obviously, revamping a couple seconds here at the show. Pop-up show today. Had to get through everything. Been working on a bunch of different things in the background, but we've got a weird one. 9 games on FanDuel. They're leaving out the rescheduled Los Angeles game again. They did that over the weekend with the Clips. Now they're doing it with the Lakers game. So 9 games FanDuel, 10 games DraftKings, and really late running slate, which is kind of annoying because one fun piece of news, I'm going to hop on at some point tonight and knock out a quick little show for that baseball game that we've got tomorrow morning. We're coming up on right about 13 hours till Major League Baseball from Tokyo. First game of the season. And then we'll have another 10 days or so till actual opening day. That's on the 27th. But we've got baseball tomorrow, and I'm going to hop on and I'm going to talk about that showdown slate for anybody who's playing. It's at 6 a.m. That's not when I'm going live. I'm also not going live at 5 to talk about it right before it starts. But we'll talk about something. Given the way the NBA schedule is, it'll probably be 10 o'clock tonight. I'm thinking maybe I jump on. It'll be maybe a half hour. There's only one game to talk about, so it's not like we're going to need to be on forever. But I'm going to try and make that happen. But the reason that it's kind of annoying the way the NBA is laid out, and you'll get me knocked out at least, we've got a 7:30 start time today. There's only one game. It's the worst game on the slate. And then there are, 3 8 o'clocks, a 9, and then 4 10s that are all on both sites, and then that 10:30 on DraftKings. So maybe it'll be at 10:30. I don't think I'm going to go to 11. I don't want to be down here like talking in this voice while people are like trying to sleep up above me, but you never know. I could always do it like this and just be like, yeah, you know what you guys want to play is you want to look at some Shohei Ohtani. We'll see what happens. But at some point tonight, you'll see a little pop-up. You'll also see projections will be live on the site way earlier than that. We've actually got them right there. Figured I'd pull it up as a little teaser. Just got done setting up the board, setting up the projected lineups and everything, but that is your teaser for projections. So they're ready to roll. Just got to get them up on the site. And again, we will do a quick rundown show. Maybe I'll do it earlier now that I'm thinking it through. 7:30 start. If I get us up and out of here, no, that's not really going to work. 6:30. I'm going to want that hour, and then we've got the 8 o'clock. Maybe I'll do it at 8. Because we've only got one game at 9, and it's Chicago, Utah, which is a total mess. Keep your eyes out. I might do it earlier than I was thinking. Maybe like 8:15, something like that. 8:15 to like 8:45. And then just keep an eye on Chicago, Utah, and hopefully we'll have any news for that. Because we've got that game on an island at 9 with an hour on either side. It's 3 8 o'clock games, 4 10 o'clock games. So that might work. Keep your eye on like 8:15. I think we might jump on for the baseball show then. Hopefully that gave people enough time to trickle in. Looks like it did. Welcome, welcome. We are here to talk about basketball, though. Another chaotic slate. Cannot wait for the season to end. Knock out some playoff basketball, which is much more stable, more sane. Tight rotations for playoff basketball. Nice and easy. Fewer games. But this is usually the part of the season that I just don't play personally. It does create opportunities. By the way, Chuma Okeke not on the DraftKings slate last I checked. Not relevant right now. I don't think anything's going to change there. He didn't go through the DraftKings sim. Not on the 0% exposed on FanDuel, so I'm just taking him off the board there, so we're clean. But yeah, this is just the ugly part of the season. So a lot of what we talk about here is going to be irrelevant. There are several very large question marks looming on this slate. As Anthony Taylor says in the chat, it's going to be a crazy slate. I'm telling you, man, I'm with you. I'm King Subscribe says, I love the pop-up shows. Yeah, look, I'd love to have a much more stable scheduled setup. But I wanted to be able to jump on, especially because it's been a few days. I wanted to be able to jump on to talk about this. Wanted to be able to mention to everybody that baseball is going to be live and the projections for baseball for tomorrow are going to be up. I'm going to do the home run picks. We don't need top stacks for a 1-game slate, but I'll home run pick it out, and you'll have all the numbers and everything. And as just discussed, I will knock out a quick show for it. But let's get into this one. Let me run down the Vegas board real quick. I'm going to try and keep this tight. I'm going to try and get us out of here. 6:30 would be great. 7:30 start time. Miami Heat at the New York Knicks. The worst game on the board. The first game, the 7:30 game before we get to several at 8 o'clock. Knicks favored by 7 in a home game. Still no Jalen Brunson, but a lot of top-end pieces for the Knicks. But just a 209 total. It's a grindy game against the Heat. I could see this going way low as far as scoring, as far as output. Any given share of Karl Anthony Towns, Josh Hart, Tyler Hero, Bam Adebayo is fine, but there are not going to be any priorities in that game. Indy at Minnesota. Oh, by the way, happy St. Patrick's Day to everybody. Just caught a glimpse of myself, my sleeve there in green. Happy St. Patrick's Day to all my fellow Irishmen out there. Everybody else who's pretending to be Irish for a day. Happy St. Patrick's Day to you as well. But hopefully you guys are enjoying it. Don't know that I have a good local source of corned beef and cabbage, but see if I can go find something later on. Not sure when that's going to happen. Maybe I'll crack open a beer or two after the baseball show and celebrate that way. Indy at Minnesota, 8.5 point spread, in Minnesota favored in the home game. 228.5 point total there. Just an are who they are kind of a spot for basically everybody in that one, unless we get some missing pieces. We got several question marks. Detroit at New Orleans, 6.5 point spread favoring the road team Detroit Pistons. 234 point total, fairly juicy. You can definitely run up the score against New Orleans. Detroit's got several capable pieces, mostly Cade up at the top with just a pretty big projection overall, looking good. Pieces and parts on the New Orleans side, depending on who's available. Philly at Houston, another messy team with Philly. Houston favored by 16.5 in a home game, 224.5 point total. That puts Philly, just for the record, at a 104 implied total, which is 4 points lower than the Knicks on the strong side of that weak Miami-New York game. So Philly, outside of just the value guys that are going to come available and some of whose salaries have kind of normalized, not a ton of priorities there at that low total. Houston, in terms of the game total, 120.5 points implied total, should just absolutely handle this Philly team. Chicago, Utah, going to be an interesting one. Major question marks on the Utah side of things as far as who's actually going to play, who's not. We've had several players ruled out. We've got a number of very dubious questionables on the board. I expect that to get real thin and real value laden. 240.5 point total is super juicy. Two bad teams playing one another at a high pace yields some pretty good results DFS wise. A lot of Chicago, a lot of Utah coming through on both sides. Memphis, Sacramento, 3 point spread in that one, 237 point total. Not bad on either side. We'll see what we get out of this game. I'm sure we'll get some pieces and parts at least in like the mid-range. Not sure what we'll get out of the top end. Memphis definitely missing some guys though. Scottie Pippen's questionable. He's like the value play that could come up a little bit. He's in here. Let's say, 36%, 42% of Scottie above the field FanDuel, below the field DraftKings, but looking like an interesting value, assuming that he plays. But we'll see what happens with that spot. Washington, Portland. 6 point spread, 231 point total. Again, probably another one where it's just going to kind of come up as an are who they are. Like here's some Klingon, 20%, 26%. Is he the highest owned guy out of that game? No, Denny is projected up pretty well, 20% FanDuel, 31% DraftKings. We're getting some Champagne there, so a little bit more coming out of the Washington-Portland game than I might have expected, which is fine. Those guys are appropriately priced for being middle-of-the-road type NBA players, decent enough total. Toronto, Phoenix. Toronto missing a lot of bodies and a number of other question marks lingering for them. Phoenix favored by 8.5 in a home game, 226 point total. No Grayson Allen, no Bradley Beal on the Phoenix side. Pieces and parts at best from Phoenix. We'll see what happens with Toronto as far as where the value comes from. Denver at Golden State. Obviously a couple big name players in that one. A 238 point total. Not bad. 4.5 point spread favoring the hometown Golden State Warriors. But we can definitely look at the top of the board. We can take some of those minutes heavy Denver guys out of the middle. Think that's kind of interesting. So a lot to work with in that game. Not sure what we're going to prioritize till we get into the board, but definitely playable. San Antonio and the Lakers to round out your DraftKings slate. Lakers favored by 9.5 in a home game. 230-point total on the board there. Obviously still no LeBron. Pushes Luka up the board pretty nicely as a pay-up option. Pieces and parts otherwise on the Lakers side. And then not sure what we'll see from San Antonio. Stephon Castle coming through a little bit. 9%. Not much more than that, though. A little bit of Sohan down here, a little bit of a sell, but everybody basically single digits on the San Antonio side. Where's Luka? Yeah, Luka. that's noteworthy. 70% share of Luka Doncic coming out of our sim right now at 12,000 point guard on DraftKings. Not available on FanDuel because they just don't have that game. But that's a pretty good diving in point as far as talking about the slate. Luka is just short of our value mark of 5.5 that we're chasing for like a strong value play. But as we've talked about a ton of times, when you're talking about a per minute guy like this, when we're talking about a superstar player who is capable of 100, you're not as worried about that value mark. If he was at a 5, he'd still look good. Just looks like the dominant pay-up play of the day right now. Everybody else up here near the top of the board, a little bit more shaky than Luka Doncic. Kevin Huerter, Johnny Juzang, Scottie Pippen on a Q tag, Justin Champagny, Obi Toppin with minutes expected, but going up against Minnesota. That is not a pretty top end of the board, but a lot of value available on this one. Getting into some of the ins and the outs. Svi Mikhailiuk fell to questionable during the day. Who the hell knows? Nick Richards, Cody Martin, both probable. Bradley Beal, Grayson Allen, both out as mentioned. And then that was the updates that came in after I put the initial one up. Probables, Haywood Highsmith and Duncan Robinson, both available. The G League Pacers, who they've been listing as probables lately, are all probable today. That's Ray J. Dennis, Enrique Freeman, and Quentin Jackson. Kobe White, Christian Brown, Gary Payton Jr., Jalen Martin, Nick Richards, and Cody Martin, all probable. Questionables, Andrew Wiggins, kind of important. Paquime Dadier, not at all important for the Knicks out of the G League, but if he's there, it's maybe 4 minutes that he plays or doesn't play. Yves Missi, Kelly O, Zion, Johnny Furphy, Tyrese Halliburton, Aaron Nesmith, Miles Turner. There's all your questionable Pacers and Pellies. Gershon Yabusele is questionable for Philly. That's a big domino for them potentially. Then we get Jordan Clarkson, Keontae George, and Larry Markkinen all questionable. Aaron Gordon and Nikola Jokic are both questionable, as is Jamal Murray. Stephen Curry is questionable. Quentin Post, Scottie Pippen Jr., Trey Lyles, Marcus Smart, and Jordan McLaughlin are all questionables. Out, Alec Burks, Nikola Jovic, not Jokic, but Jovic. Drew Smith, Jalen Brunson, Jaden Ivey, Brandon Boston, Herb Jones, DeJounte Murray, Isaiah Jackson, Pascal Siakam, Adam Bona, Andre Drummond, Joel Embiid, Paul George, Eric Gordon, Kyle Lowry, Tyrese Maxey, Jerry McCain, Kelly Oubre Jr., Lonnie Walker IV, Reed Shepard, Amen Thompson, Lonzo Ball, Ayo Dosunmu, Josh Giddey's doubtful, John Collins is out, Taylor Hendricks, KJ Martin, Colin Sexton, Jaden Springer, Julian Strother, Gigi Jackson, Yuki Kawamura, John Morant, Zion Pullen, RJ Barrett, Ulrich Kromke, who I continue to think is just a creative player who landed on their out list at some point. Grady Dick, Brandon Ingram, Jakob Poeltl. I for reasons, spelled it Jacob Poeltl, and I'm compelled to fix it. I've written Jakob Poeltl's name approximately 7,000 times in my life, and for some reason today I decided to call him Jacob Poeltl. That is his name, if you Englishize it, but spelled with a K. Anyway, Jared Roden is back to the G League. Jacoby Walters out. Sadiq Bey, Malcolm Brogdon, Bilal Coulibaly, Corey Kispert, Charles Bassey, Malachi Branham, Darren Fox, Victor Wembanyama, and Grayson Allen. Fun one. Going to be more chaotic. Definitely going to see some unknowns out there. Gonna see some changes as this one comes through. Dougie, what's going on, buddy? Doug maxed out the $5 5,000 a first starting 5 on DK today with 100% Jokic. His game starts after all the other center games, so I really need him to play. You have a read on Jokic playing? Not particularly. Is there anything in that line that would be? I don't think there's anything too telling in Vegas. I don't really have a good read on it, unfortunately. What time does that start relative to It's obviously a gigantic switch, but you've got it's $1,000 price difference going the wrong way, though. I was going to say you would have the pivot to Doncic available at that point. Oh, no, it is going in your favor, actually. I'm sorry. You would pick up $1,000 in salary if you had to pivot to Luka Doncic, who currently looks like the best play on the slate in the game that's a half hour later than that. So I think at worst you're safe playing the Jokic shares up. Right now we got him just at 10%. He's a little bit further from the value mark than Luka is, given the extra $1,000 in salary for essentially the same projection in the raw sense. But with those two players, again, we're not as concerned about value. So they're projected about the same. It's just what the pure $1,000 extra that you get by playing Luka over Jokic buys you in other spots rather than their head-to-head. And obviously they very quickly even out once the slate starts in terms of which one of them is going to hit the absolute ceiling. But either way, you're going fine there. It's just $1,000 more for Jokic is having a big impact on what we got of him. 10% and below the field, I have no problem taking more than that, though. But again, we do have this ridiculously stark share of Luka at 70% and way above the field there. That said, he is popular, so you're going anti-field by going to Jokic, but not a great read, Doug, unfortunately, on whether he plays. Let's see if there's anything we can track down from a beat reporter real quick. Not really seeing much. I am seeing a lot of people in the community calling him out for a lot of overs, which would suggest to me that he's probably playing. But that's just people speculating, and I don't even know the quality of a lot of these people. I'm scrolling past just looking for news. I don't see anything concrete from a actual beat reporter anytime recently. $530's out. Still questionable on the 530. As is Jamal, as is Aaron Gordon. There's a right elbow contusion, left ankle impingement. Made up words for ouchies. I'm going to go on the line, out on a limb, and I'm going to say he's going to play. He's a gamer. I think he's out there. But again, obviously, we're just we're talking about two of the top end plays of the day. And again, if you have that position on DraftKings anyway, totally different situation on FanDuel because you don't have the Doncic play, but you can make that change fairly efficiently. And then you pick up a lot of salary value, and you're going to be changing a lot of spots. So make sure you have more than one spot left, which should naturally happen given that there's 4 games at 10 o'clock. Anyway, let's cut into the guards here and talk about some of these guys. Everything's going by DK today as per usual because it's the missing game is on the FanDuel side, so we're okay to sort by DK today. So several really highly owned guys among the guards. And tell you what, it's kind of unique to have 4 different guys above 25% exposure, all of whom are point guard only. And it's actually 5 if you count Luka up at the top. But these guys are obviously different kind of plays than Luka. One of those is Cade. He's the guy we got furthest below the field at 27%, but that's still a decent share of Cade. He's played this season at 1.41 per minute. Again, they're going up against New Orleans, kind of a pushover team. My one concern would be maybe a little bit of a haircut for minutes. I've got him at 35, played 29 and put up 29 in their most recent game. Not exactly sure what happened there. I'm not concerned that he's only going to play 30 the rest of the way or anything like that, but I think you could conceivably give him 33 and just, figure that they're going to wax this team and maybe they give him a couple minutes off toward the end of the night. But he's probably gotten his work done to be at least at these medians, if not well beyond in that kind of a scenario. But we are below the field, 27% DraftKings, just 9% on FanDuel where he's 10-5. Obviously, different value proposition. Getting him above a 5 on DraftKings, 5-1-8, good enough. 4-6-6 when we need 5 on FanDuel. Even from a guy, Cade normally would qualify for good enough. He's over that value problem anyway, but we do need a little bit more than this. So the price is a little problematic on him on FanDuel. Kevin Huerter doesn't have a price problem. He's at 5,000. Small forward only on FanDuel. Shooting guard and small forward on DraftKings. He's in 50%. Pure half of your lineups on DraftKings right now is a 5.97 value. 0.80 per minute for the season. Tons and tons of upside for everybody in the Chicago-Utah game in terms of pace, in terms of playing against terrible opponents. Bad players playing against bad players can yield some good DFS numbers. So lots of Kevin Huerter. Not the most stable guy in the universe for minutes. Got him at 32 right now. Gave us 33.6 in his last game. Put up a solid 17 fantasy points. That is not good. That's not going to win you a slate even at price, especially not at 5,000 and 5,200. He needs to do more than that. Fortunately, he's better than that. So we can expect better, assuming we get the minutes. Minutes is where the fragility comes from. 50% share going to Johnny Juzang right now on the DraftKings slate. He's only 3,600 over there. The minutes have been there lately. I've got him at 28. He played 28.9 in their last game. Put up just 20.7 FanDuel points. He's a 0.80 DraftKings per minute player. He's fine on DraftKings at 3,600. But you can see at 42 on FanDuel, small forward only, we didn't get a single share of him. Just a different play. Now, part of that, he is at a 5.77. So there might just be some happenstance there that's just boxing him out of shares because that's not a bad value score. Kind of want to see what's going on at small forward on FanDuel. That's really weird. So we got 66, 44 right there. I can get behind those. And then another like 20-ish piece for those guys. Yeah, there's 32 hiding right there. Among those guys, now we're at 268% just right there. And then we've got another 10 and a 15 right there. And a 10 and a 16 down there. Some of these guys are obviously multi-position. But at least some of that's up to 320 already without him. So some of that's going through the other positions. But I'm not sure that his 5.77 shouldn't play a little bit stronger. Like, why would we get one share of $4,400, 4.59 value Ryan Dunn? Literally one share. Instead of $4,200 Johnny Juzang. So a little bit of happenstance there. Or maybe something just wacky happened in that sim. Let me just double check that. Go to the top 500 here. Bear with me one sec. I just want to make sure this is right. Because again, that is the reason I'm looking into this is that right there, that value score. Because that 5.77, these are all the available small forwards on FanDuel. That's the third best value score. It's only behind the 6.04 that we're getting out of Huerter and the 5.82 out of Champagny. To have not gotten any shares when we're getting a bunch of other guys. Now, granted, there are higher raw projections here for some of these guys, so maybe that's it. There's just so much value elsewhere that it's just going to one of these guys and then sweeping those guys up and not worrying about this. But I feel like we should have gotten some. He's not in any of the top 500 lineups that went through the sim. Let me check one more thing. Let me make sure I didn't fat finger something when I put him in the sim board to begin with. Johnny Juzang. Yeah, you went through. Everything went through normally. That's a weird little outlier. Let's get the latest ownership projection. Not a good player, not somebody reliable at all. Totally fragile as far as the minutes, as far as his ability to even produce fantasy points in those minutes. Yeah, so he's projected for essentially no ownership. So our sim result jibes with the ownership from the site that we go back and forth about the value of their ownership projections. But this does jibe kind of well with that. At worst, though, I think you can consider Johnny Juzang a value alternative on FanDuel. Again, he's projection-wise several 8-ish points away from both of these guys, but he's also quite a bit cheaper. Cheaper than those guys, better looking to me than Ryan Dunn. So I would just default go to Juzang over Ryan Dunn, at least the way it's shaped right now. So like I would give him that share. I think you could, these are differently priced types. You could look maybe at some of these couple of Ben Mathurin shares, 4.63 value score for a little bit more money. Nothing overly compelling there. 4.94 out of Royce O'Neal. Again, for 4,400. For 200 less, I've got a better value mark here. I've got a higher raw projection here. This is wasting too much time on Johnny Juzang on FanDuel, but that is a weird outcome in our sims. But again, he's not projected for public ownership on the FanDuel slate, so keep him in mind as a reasonable alternative, especially if you're going against any of these guys that he's the same as that are coming away with actual public ownership. Interesting pivot point. Not at all on DraftKings. We got him plenty. We got him in half our lineups. He's well above the field. He's a 6.91 value play for his 3,600. Really interesting site-to-site results there. Let me get off of this topic. As mentioned, Scottie Pippen, if he is available, looking like a smash value play on both sites. 36% for your 5,500 on FanDuel at 28 minutes. Could pick up a little bit more than that. Played 29.5 in their last game. Put up a 42.7 FanDuel score. He is a very, very capable fantasy scorer. 1.12 per minute in his on and off time. 64 games averaging 20 minutes. But we know what it looks like when he gets the replacement minutes. And I do think that's the situation here. So 36% above the field. Love it at 5.6 for a value on FanDuel. And then on DraftKings at 4,700, point guard only, 6.39 value score, 42%. We're actually below the field over there. That's how strong he looks. I do think you could take that up a little bit and level it with the field. But we've got so much to work with that there's probably no real need to. There's a bad keeping up with the Joneses joke that'll spare you guys to be made there, but 42% and 12% respectively for Trey and Tyus Jones on FanDuel. Decent enough shares of either guy. Obviously, you're talking about two different kinds of plays, 6,300 versus 4,900, shooting guard versus point guard only, 5.5 value score versus just 5.28. So the ownership distributions make sense. They completely jibe with where the field is. On DraftKings, $5,900 Trey Jones, coming up a little bit lighter than the field at 32%, but still a significant share. And then 30% of $4,300 Tyus Jones coming up significantly. He's a better value. Among the four spots, Tyus Jones DraftKings is the best value at 6.06. 5.99 value on Trey Jones is also more valuable technically. Well, 5.5 on FanDuel. He's probably about the same value on both. He's about half over what we're looking for. There's a little bit more meat on the bone for Tyus Jones on DraftKings. We're below the field on both guys, though. Cade we talked about, but you can always load up more shares of Cade. Luke Kennard just looking like a mix and match with some missing pieces from Memphis. We did get him 20% on DraftKings. He's a .90 DraftKings player. He's all right. 4,500. He's at best, though, I think he's a overowned, swappable piece with these guys, and I think I would just want more of most of those guys. If we're going to be on a position with Kennard, I'd rather be below the field if I'm keeping 1 and 5 in my pocket. You can even discard some of those. Stephon Castle not on FanDuel, getting 9% of them below the field on DraftKings. Perfectly fine. 0.96 per minute. Could play up from that a little bit in this one with just all the missing bodies in San Antonio. So I don't mind that. Kobe White, significant piece on both sides, but we are below the field on both. 36%. The site that the ownership comes from has him several points ahead of where I do. I think they've got him misprojected. So keep that in mind that this might not be as stark to the field in the end as it might look like right now. I'm expecting him to be very good. I've got him with a strong projection. But they just went way up the ladder with him, and I don't know that that's appropriate. He's a 0.95 per minute FanDuel player and a 1.0 per minute DraftKings player this year. I have him at a 115 DraftKings per minute, and I am 4 points light of where they've got him. So literally, you got to put him at a like 1.27, trending toward the high end of 1.27, which, not that he's not capable of going out there and doing that any given game, but that is giving him a lot of credit on top of that 1.0. If you're going to give it to him, this is definitely one of the games to consider it, but I felt like I was being generous at 115. They're giving him quite a bit of faith, putting him in the mid-40s. So I think it makes sense that we landed here versus the field. If you believe the other way, take more. He's not unreasonable to take more of, but I'm content having 16 to 20%, let's say, and being below the field here. At 36%, I want to be right about there on FanDuel, I think. Again, nothing wrong with Kobe White here. Don't get me wrong. 115 per minute, even at that, he looks very, very strong. It's above the value mark there. He's closing in on it, close enough to it over here. Multi-position on both sides, fairly priced for the opportunity. Nothing but success in his future in this spot. I just disagree with how highly projected they have him, and it has an impact on how the sim results come out. Middleton is who he is, mix and match kind of a spot. A couple outliers, FanDuel to DraftKings in Scoot Henderson and Timoni Kamara. Both guys look okay, playing up against a terrible Washington team. Portland better than Washington at this point. 0.95 per minute, 0.80 per minute. On DraftKings, we only got 8-9% of both guys at 57 and 54. I think that makes sense given all the value shares that we want to push through those positions. You also don't have any multi-position on Scoot, so I can see how he would be a little bit more limited there. And then a lot of onesie-twosie shares going down the board. It does look like there's a bit of a plateau after getting so much of those top-end guys, where we're getting a lot of just on-off shares of single digits. So you can definitely pick your way through this and make pivots around a lot of the similarly priced $9,200 Devin Booker versus $8,900 Austin Reeves, coming up the same, essentially the exact same projection. You can play the value game, you can play the ownership game to your heart's content with those guys. They're essentially projected exactly the same with a slight salary difference. So push those guys back and forth. Same deal with like $7,100 $7,100 Anthony Simons. I knew Colin Gillespie wasn't going to be that guy. It cost $71. $6,900 Devin Vassell. Same story. Projected almost exactly the same. You can move those two pieces around back and forth in lineups. You can even take it to the point where I'm going to take 0 shares of one and double up my shares and get slightly above and build a position. It might be better to do that with like 2 of these guys and build a third one well above the fields to create an actual position. But then you're zeroing out pieces that may be important. For tournament play, for large fields, if you're playing a bunch of lineups too, this is the way that you want it. This is what creates your variance around the locked-in cash plays, right? The locked-in optimal plays. So you want to have a pretty decent distribution through the reasonable options that could hit ceilings and so forth. That's where you create your tournament upside, and that's where you create your variance even with the highly owned players that we want to have in our lineups, as we've been talking about all year. They're highly owned for a reason. You want them, but you also want this kind of a structure for the most part. And then you can pick and choose some of those positions. On FanDuel, with one fewer game, we're getting 32% Shaedon Sharpe. We're getting 24% Mikal Bridges out of that Knicks game. That seems like a lot of Mikal. He is above the value threshold at 6,300. He plays both shooting guard and small forward on the FanDuel slate. He's been a moderate performer in terms of fantasy this year, 0.78 per minute down from 0.94 last year, but a completely different role with the Knicks. He also hasn't been quite as good offensively, though. Going up against Miami, again, that low total, I don't love that game. I would probably look to draw this down, be a little bit below the field, maybe have more like 15% of Mikal Bridges, but obviously good enough to draw that share. Booker at 15% FanDuel, 5% DraftKings. Again, is who he is situation. The minutes are there. The price is correct, though. Just has him at a 4.67 value for his 1.23, 1.22 per minute. We basically had that situation with Booker and Durant so long this season that we know exactly what it's going to look like. So nothing special popping off the page for him. All right, Joker, go lay down, buddy. Do need to call out what I just noticed there, a 50% share of Jared Butler on the DraftKings FanDuel slate. 50% FanDuel at 5,200 point guard only versus 2% and hard undercut to the field at 6,000 on DraftKings. Obviously, that's all about that price. He's been playing the minutes, 28 minutes in the last one, put up 22.7. That's not nearly the 1.08 per minute that we've gotten out of him in his 42 games, his 12.5 minutes per night throughout the season. But he's a capable enough around a point per minute guy, so I think it's reasonable to have him projected slightly under a point per minute in his 28 minutes. I do think he can go there for price on FanDuel at 52, but keep in mind, this is not a $4,100 guy. This is not even a $4,500. That's over $5,000 is not a ridiculous value play on FanDuel in the raw sense, as far as just like that price is so low that I can buy anything I want. That's a good value for this slate at 52, but that price is creeping up a little bit. There's some fragility in there created more by the price, I think, than the minutes or the performance. Jordan Goodwin makes a match on DraftKings. Dante DiVincenzo makes a match on DraftKings. We got 10% on FanDuel of Ant. I would take more of Ant if I could. 9,200 is a pretty decent price. His 119 per minute plays up a little bit against Indy, but not a priority situation at all. Above the field on Malik Monk at 26%. That's a little bit of a surprise. As usual, though, anybody with Sacto out of that group of guys that plays, there's 6-7 guys on that team that average over 30 minutes, and Monk is one of them. I do think you can go there at 35 minutes for 71. He looks pretty strong. Above the value threshold on FanDuel, 5.07 in more than a quarter of our lineups and above the field. On DraftKings at 79, he just doesn't fit. 0%. Collier also above the value threshold here. We got him below the field in just 9%. I'm kind of content with that. The minutes are stable-ish, around 28 to 30. I've got him at 30. He played 31.5 in the last game. 22.2 fantasy points. With the price up where it is now, given the action that he's seen, even in that juicy game environment, I don't love the Collier play. He can take a little bit more of it if he plays, for every additional minute that he plays, that price gets more and more correct. But it feels like it's crept up a little bit too high for his actual production. 0.84 per minute, 0.88 per minute. And then the last guy to talk about down here is Jordan Clarkson. If he goes, is playable in a is Jordan Clarkson kind of a sense. The forwards and the centers on the board. Haven't mentioned it all show, but the website is rotoscouts.com. Hit the like button if you're here. I will jump back into the chat in just a second. I've had you guys off the screen accidentally all this time. Apologies if I'm ignoring missing players, questions, etc. Doug says, not that we need more value on this slate, but I think Looney could be a sneaky play tonight with post questionable, and the Warriors historically going to Looney for big minutes against Jokic. Let's see. We'll see where he came up. I do have a few minutes on him. I ended up with 11. I had him as high as 16 at one point when I was monkeying with the projections, but I ended up knocking him down. I forget who it was in favor of, but maybe that goes up a little bit. Right now, not looking like a piece, given where I've got him projected for time. But the 115, the 112, obviously, any additional minutes you give him looks better and better for 3,200. I don't think you're completely wrong if you have that expectation of minutes, Doug. Or let me rephrase. I don't think you're wrong at all if you have an expectation of minutes. Like if I change, let's see, Golden State. And he did play, he went 6 in their last game. Averaging 14 over the last 3. That was let's see, what do we get? 6, 17, 20. If you get that 20, you could be home free on that play. Even the 17 is workable. Whoops. So let's see if we go back to 16 and just knock down, just for argument's sake, move that. Definitely a minute there, and I just need one more, so we will change this to 19, and we'll be good. Right out of the gate, that would move them to 1-2, and give them. You're home. That's a 16-minute. Right. So if you get it, you would need Jokic in that situation, I would think, to justify anything here. But again, just giving him 16 minutes makes it look like this, and you're notably above the value mark, 563. We're there, just 3,200. I would temper expectations for like destroying the slate, but as far as a value step stool, that would get him on the board for sure if you could give him that additional 5 minutes. That's all the difference, because he is, again, a good enough per minute guy. You could argue that I shouldn't give him his full per minutes in that situation too, because the reason he'd be out there would be, going up against the best center in the world. But I think it's legitimate. I think it's at least arguable if you're giving him that additional time. And yeah, as you point out, that's still with the changes I just made to get him to 16. I didn't take Post out. I just knocked him down. I knocked a minute off of him, a minute off of Santos, and a minute off of Kuminga, and I guess somebody else. Maybe it was 2 minutes off Kuminga. But yeah, obviously, if you get Post out, that creates a much larger void of minutes that is much more easy to just distribute and justify him getting like 18, 20, like I said. Let's talk about the guys who are landing strongly at the top right now. Obi Toppin on DraftKings, looking kind of ridiculous at 3,600, power forward in the center. I've got him at 26 minutes. No Siakam and a number of other guys questionable. So could be even more minutes on the table for Obi. He's a good enough per minute guy, 1.01 on DraftKings, 1.0 on FanDuel. On the FanDuel slate for 44, power forward only, the 26 minutes wasn't enough. The 5.86 value score, it's kind of playing like Juzang. That's miles above the 5.0 that we're looking for on FanDuel. But in this case, it's visible, right? He's competing at power forward only, so you can kind of skip over some of the small forwards. There's Juzang himself. Actually, the visibility is all at small forward, though, so we're going to have to do this again. Let me get power forwards on the board on FanDuel. I just want to see why that's getting some wacky results here on some of these uniquely priced value guys. Look how I'm not a fan of how this FanDuel sim landed today. I'm really not. I gotta say, I don't really see the justification in why we would get essentially no shares of $4,400 Obi Toppin at a 5.86 value score, 25 and change projection for 44 versus the 6% across our top 150 lineups that we got of Patty Williams at 4.85 value, 19 raw projection. Yeah, it's a $400 price difference, and I guess that's driving it. But what about $4,400 Royce O'Neal projected for the same minutes at the same price, sharing power forward eligibility, nearly a full point of value further removed, 12% exposed? You can't tell me that's all going through small forward with the other ownership that we've got at small forward. This FanDuel board is a little bit weird today. So keep that in mind. FanDuel, again, there's nothing wrong with this play. It's just a funky result. Let me check what they've got him projected at ownership-wise. You could have two sneaky FanDuel plays on our hands there. Yeah, 0.05. I mean, 5. I mean 10, 15, 9, 11, 1, 6. Trying to throw a bunch of different numbers at you guys to confuse the issue because I accidentally just gave away their ownership projection. But it's nothing. They essentially are not projecting him for ownership, which, again, jibes with this weird result from our sim. But I don't know that the sim I'm not questioning the way the numbers landed, but it feels like that's a second value guy on FanDuel that we can keep in our pocket and make a lot of really interesting swaps with. Something to keep in mind for like the hand builders out there. If you're manually putting together like 25 lineups tonight, or not even hand building, but just like, you're running 25 lineups, doing process and everything for them, that might be a really, really interesting pivot point, him and Juzang on the FanDuel side. On DraftKings, he's no secret, but we did get him at 76%, dramatically over the field. Let's see what the actual field number is. He's not on Utah. I had Juzang in my head to check too. Oh, I see the difference. That's interesting. I would have thought we would have gotten... The DraftKings number makes sense, being that dramatically above the field in our formatting and everything there, because they do have them projected differently. I'm just noticing. Dramatically differently, actually. Really? I've got him right around his 1.0, 26.36 in 26 minutes is essentially 1.01 and change. Just for comparison's sake, they have him under 20 DraftKings points in 3 fewer minutes than what I have, which does not make sense. I think he's a better play than that. If they're correct about the ownership, we're going to look really different than the public, which can be a good thing. But obviously, it's a little bit fragile around the 26 minutes that I've got him at. He did only play 22.6 in their last game. But again, unique situation here for him. So I like the upside. Keep an eye on where the minutes go. If I knock him down to like 22, it obviously is going to change the nature of that play. Right now at 3,600, power forward and center eligible, he's looking like a top-end value play to me. Draymond's is who he is situation. 25% on FanDuel, perfectly fine. He's above the value threshold at a 5.13. He's got multi-position at power forward and center. Probably don't want him that much at center, but playable there. 32% exposed at 5,900, below the field on DraftKings. Just never my favorite player to get to, honestly. He always feels like he's about correctly priced. 5,900 maybe is arguably a little bit light on DK for the 1.02. It's just Draymond does Draymond things. He stuffs the stat sheet across the board. 54.1% true shooting, 25.8% assist, 10.1% rebounding. So he's a good enough fantasy performer, but I don't like to get overloaded to Draymond. So if anything, I think I would take a negative position from where we're at. Maybe draw DraftKings down to like 25, create a larger negative position against the field. Maybe draw FanDuel down to like 18, 20, create a larger negative position against the field. But again, the value is there. He's above the value threshold on both sites tonight. Denny at a 5.08 on FanDuel, above the mark. 7,800, looking pretty solid over there. Again, going up against Washington is going to make everybody from Portland look at least decent, and he's probably their best player right now. We got him 18% of the time, level with the field on the FanDuel slate. On DraftKings, 31% because he's 7,100 over there. Both forward spots eligible, above the value mark. Looks great. I would honestly not mind more. If you're drawing down Draymond, it's a very different price play, but maybe you can work some of these shares into some of those with some of the other pivots on the board that we talked about. Patty Williams at 36. Fine. Reasonable, I guess. In 22 minutes, though, I don't love chasing the guys when we've got so much value to work with guys who are realistically projected for upper 20s minutes. I don't love going down the board to the lower 20s minutes guys, especially when it's a lower 20s minutes guy who is only a moderate usage guy, 16.3 last year, 16.4 this year, 0.76 FanDuel last year, 0.75 FanDuel this year, 0.76 DraftKings. It's just who he is. So the price is fine. it's not offensive to pay $4,000 or $3,600 for shares of Patty Williams with a 22-minute expectation. But there are better value spots on the board. And again, one of them on FanDuel to me is Obi Toppin with several more minutes. Aaron Gordon, assuming he's out there, 57 on FanDuel, didn't really get him. 5,000 on DraftKings, didn't really get him. I'm just realizing, am I still sorted by... I think I am, right? Yeah, I never undid that. I was like, there's got to be guys missing on DraftKings. There we go. I knew that board looked a little light. So let's see. We've talked about Herta. We've talked about Juzang. We have not talked about Champagny. Coming out of the Washington side of that Washington-Portland game as by far the most highly owned guy from D.C., I think. Right? Nobody else out of Washington came up that much. 5,600, reasonable price. Another guy pulling some of the weight away from Johnny Juzang, I guess. Maybe it's just a product of that. There's so much value that you've got some of the mid-range guys pulling through as the value plays in the fives instead of needing to go down to the fours on FanDuel today just by the nature of the slate. Because, again, we're not paying for Luka on the FanDuel slate. There's just fewer pay-ups. So maybe it's more of a mid-board slate. 44%, way above the field at a 5.82 value score. On DraftKings, 5,400, both forward spots, 38.6% level with the field. Absolutely fine. The 0.99 performer, 0.97 performer. The usage is a little bit light. He's an okay rebounder at 11.5%. But just looking like a fair price play that we've got money to afford. Again, we don't need to fill too many spots today, it doesn't look like, with crazy cheap guys. So I think it'll play a little bit stronger through the fives. Vooch looking like a killer on both sides, 30+%. I would take more if I could on FanDuel at 7,400. Looks just absolutely tremendous, 5.75 value score and potential to climb even higher than that. This is a 31-minute projection. He's averaged around 32 for the season. Played just 29 in their last game. Lots of question marks, obviously, in the front line for Utah. Who knows who he's going to be going up against? He could just end up looking better. I don't think there's anything they can do that he's going to look worse. So, love the Vooch play. If he ends up even going like 28 minutes, I think you're still fine. He's a good enough per minute guy. 1.21 per minute FanDuel, 1.24 per minute DraftKings. For 73 over there, 5.94 looking like a dominant DraftKings value play as well. So, love the Vooch play on both sides. We were just talking about Denny, but again, 31% on the DraftKings slate at 71. Looks very playable, but lighter than the fields. Kind of making sense just because of the popularity and other spots to dunk those shares into. Klingon on FanDuel, 6,100 as a 5.83 value. It feels like a high price to pay for Donovan Klingon, but the minutes are going to be there. Their other big men are out again. 118 per minute so far this season. He put up just the other day a 34 in 30 minutes. That's reasonable, but not killer as your single center play at 6,100, especially not if you're expecting a ton out of Vooch for not all that much more salary-wise. So the sim results reflect this, and it's kind of obvious. But I think given the choice, I would start any given lineup with Vooch over starting it with Klingon. But Klingon very playable, 1 in 5 on FanDuel seems about right. 26% on DraftKings. Everything applies the same way on DK at 5,800 as it does at 6,100 on FanDuel. It's good play. He's well above our value threshold. We need 5.5. He's at a 6.04. He is among qualified forwards and centers the third best value score of the day. So I don't want to undersell it, but I do think positionally we're correct here. Let me take 1 minute real quick for anybody who wasn't here at the top of the show. There's only a handful of people here watching, but people have been coming in and out throughout. Quick minute to remind you guys that probably somewhere around 8:15, a couple hours from now, I'm going to hop back on just for a little bit. And we are going to talk about this. Baseball tomorrow morning, 6 a.m., live from Tokyo. Dodgers, Cubs. Interesting little showdown slate. We're going to talk through it. Promise we're going to cover every slate possible for the baseball season, and we're starting out strong. So figure tonight, somewhere around 8:15 in that little window of time that we've got, we're going to jump on for about a half hour, talk about that game. Projections will be live for that game somewhere in between now and like 10 p.m.-ish. They'll get up on the site well ahead of any time. I'll be up in the morning to make sure that those lineups are updated with the confirmed lineups as well. So if you guys are looking for baseball for tomorrow, small tournaments, small slates on both sites. But I'll be up, I'll be watching, and I will be playing. Anthony Taylor nails it. MLB is back. Love it. Mr. Smith, what's up, my guy? What 2 FanDuel cash plays for you today besides topping? Appreciate you. Appreciate you too, buddy. FanDuel cash plays. As always, you can just kind of follow the exposures. These aren't optimal rates necessarily. Oh, I forgot these are we're sorted by positions. These aren't exact optimal rates. What these are is exposure in our top 150. But when you're looking for who are the best plays, who are the optimal plays of the day, the top owned guys in these kind of things, that's who you're talking about. Those are going to be the most optimal plays. Kevin Herter at 5,000 is coming up massive right now for us on FanDuel. I would say he's in that bucket. I would say $5,200 Jared Butler at least is worthy of consideration. Same deal with 5,000. And this is a good illustration of what I was just talking about before FanDuel-wise, actually. Look how much of our FanDuel weight for the entire slate is going just directly through 5, 6, and 7, salary-wise. We don't have a player. Sabonis at 89 is our most significant, highly exposed player, which is interesting. $8,900 Sabonis, $8,300 Jaren Jackson are our only 2 guys above 7,700 and 25% exposed on FanDuel. This is a really mid-board type slate on the FanDuel slate. So that explains why we're not getting, as I brought up and somewhat suspected, that's why we're not getting those shares of Johnny Juzang in the 4s. We don't really need it. I still can't explain why we would get this $4,000. Maybe it's just that raw price. It's a really interesting board. Anyway, getting back to that cash game question. I do think Scottie Pippen is really interesting, assuming he plays, and we can go up from those 28 minutes. Looks like a great value option and has performed for us in that role in the past. So for 55, that's reasonable. I probably like that a little better than Trey Jones at 63, but Trey Jones is probably a little bit more secure right now. He's owned at 42% in our top 150 and level with the field. So you got kind of a lot of options to work with out of that range. And then I don't disagree with the idea that Kobe White would be a reasonable cash option. It's just in our tournament sim here, we're getting him lighter than the field. But for cash, I think you would probably want to lock that decent upside guy in. And I think since he's fairly significantly cheaper than like Sabonis, Jaren Jackson, it's probably the direction I'd lean. Would be like if you're looking for like 2 or 3 guys, would be him and any 2 of those value types to start a lineup. I think that makes sense. And I completely left out the guy that was probably should have been the first thing out of my mouth. It's FanDuel. So Vooch. Vooch would probably be my legitimate first click in a cash lineup. I just think he looks too good. You could argue Klingon just for the value in cash. But given where I expect Vooch to be owned, given the minimal difference there and the lack of need to save at center with all the affordability. So it's probably Vooch, any 1 or 2 of these guys, and then Kobe White, not to overload you with Bulls. Doug, I got no idea what's going on with Utah. It's if I gave you anything there, I'd be guessing. I legitimately would. I know as much as you do on it, maybe less. But yeah, the entire thing with Utah is just a gigantic pain in the ass. Them, Toronto, numerous teams at this point, especially when they play one another. But yeah, I would just be guessing at it. We just got to watch the news right now. Mr. Smith, yeah, I don't think there's any real problem there. Priority would probably be Vooch between the 2, but I think you could play White and Vooch in the same lineup there. And for tournaments, that's always on the table. You can always play same guys, same lineup. For cash, it's a little bit more of a tight window, but I think you're okay there. Get back to that last few forwards and centers. hit the like, hit the subscribe if you haven't subscribed to the channel before. Check out rotoscouts.com if you're new here. Everything at Rotoscouts. NBA projections for tonight. NHL projections for tonight. MLB projections for tomorrow morning. Technically today, tomorrow, I don't know when that slate is. Less than 12 hours from now, or almost exactly 12 hours. Under $1 a day gets you access to all of it. I just saw pricing from the site I used to work for. Their MLB package is over $100 per month for the low end. Just saying. Those guys are great. Those guys don't do baseball any better than I do. And we're killing them on price. Yeah, we don't have all the bells and whistles. I get it. But under $1 a day, and you get the rest of the NBA, and you get the NHL, and you get NFL when that rolls back around before we know it toward the end of the summer. Anything else I choose to throw up on the site. Season-long baseball is going to be included in that. I'm going to have waiver pieces, 2-start pitchers, or some mashup of that kind of a piece weekly on the site for you guys. Lot of value going on at Rotoscouts. Check it out. End of sales pitch. Also check out our guys over at acemind.io. There's some results. Look, we had to talk through it to figure them out today, but they are guiding us to the right spot every time. It's a great product. They're the most affordable sim tool in the industry. They've got product for baseball, basketball, football, everything you can imagine. Check out acemind.io as well. All right, continuing on, let's wrap this thing up here, huh? So we talked about Kobe White. Orlando Robinson. Interesting, non-critical. 0.94 per minute on both sites so far this season. At 5,400, I've got him at 30 minutes right now. That's exactly what he played in the last game when he put up fewer than 14 fantasy points. That's problematic. That is not going to win you a slate when he's priced like this. It's not going to win you a slate when he's not priced like this. He's been getting the playing time just for lack of options. 5.52 is value on FanDuel. 5.90 is value on DraftKings. Numbers-wise, it makes sense. A lot of fragility when it comes to talent, when it comes to actually finding those upside scores. Patty Williams, we've talked about enough. Chris Middleton, mix and matches, who he is kind of a spot. Jokic, again, 10% on both sites, 10.6. Very expensive, entirely justifiable. If you can get to more Nikola Jokic, given the shape of the slate, do so. That might be where some of those value guys that we talked about that aren't really coming up for ownership end up coming in. If you swap out a $5,000 guy for a $4,000 guy, when they're coming up essentially the same for a value score, or essentially the same for raw projection, now you've got more money to spend on Jokic. Not necessarily the optimal build, but this feels like one where there are a number of paths through the woods today. Triple J, we got 28% on FanDuel. We got 4% on DraftKings. 8,400 versus 8,300. Yeah, we're well above at 518 on the FanDuel value score. Decently below at 494 on DraftKings. So it jibes. It makes sense. Just wasn't expecting it to be quite that stark. I do think you could take more. He is easily good enough to justify additional shares there. Shaden Sharp at 32%. Not a player I love. 0.89 per minute. He does have decent enough usage. The shot attempts and everything are there. 13.5% assist. 6.5% rebound rate to go with it. Needs to score the basketball. Eligibility, it's small forward and shooting guard on both sites. 5.32 value. The numbers are there. 6,200 on FanDuel, looking pretty good at 32%. On DraftKings for 6,700, though, totally different play. We got him 4% hard undercut to the field. He is at above a 5, but below the 5.5 that we need for value. I'm happy to leave him on the table there and maybe roster some. But positionally, if I want a position, which I always do, I'm probably going in more like 25% and an undercut to the field in like this kind of trajectory. Ones and twos on a lot of guys through here, but again, you do want to have these positions. Even though we're below the field, these are just the shares that creep into lineups alongside all those highly owned plays that on the day where Tobias Harris nukes the slate, yeah, the field might have more of them, but as long as you've got your handful of shares that the sim's telling you to get to, if you happen to click it into the right lineup along with all the value plays, and we all know that's where the lotto ticket of it comes in. But if you've packed the correct suitcase, Tobias Harris could be your your fake shark fin that you use to scare everybody at the beach, but it takes up a big chunk of your suitcase because he's not necessarily appropriately priced for his production right now. He's fine on DraftKings anyway at 518, but he's not appealing. He's worse on FanDuel, 6,400, 4.68. We still got him 4% of the time, which again, that's a bizarre result considering that he's going through the positions we were talking about with the Juzangs of the world. 4.68 value, but the raw projection is certainly higher than those guys. It justifies the 4% on that basis, and because again, FanDuel just came up as a very mid-board 5,000, 6,000, 5,000 through mid-sevens made up the vast majority of players in FanDuel lineups. Let's see. We haven't done this in a minute. 6:21. I'll get us out of here in the next few minutes. Handful of people here watching, so we can pull this up real quick. I just want to look at what some of those FanDuel lineups actually look like. And we'll do this for DraftKings too, because I know more you care about DraftKings. These are our top ace-mine lineups. You guys can see that, right? Yeah. So yeah, you can immediately see how level, how not Starsy Scrubsy these lineups are. Which is what I wanted to pull up. Getting a fair spend through center with obviously Vooch, who was coming up tremendously. But there is a lot of competition at the top of the board here in our very best lineups for the Vooch shares as far as how these tournament results came out. So we're getting a little bit of Turner in there. We're getting some Cat. I think that's more a product of just having some money to spread around. So you're getting just oddball shares. And if you reran this FanDuel slate, I think we would get not at the top end where the ownership is really concentrated, but among the Johnny Juzangs of the world, among the Josh Harts of the world, the Royce O'Neals of the world, the guys like that. I think you could see very, very different results just running this slate over and over again, just because of how flat that FanDuel board is looking and how non-Starsy Scrubsy it is. Those are some of our best performers, at least current state. And, of course, we'll get all sorts of things change. And once there's news, that everything I've said about the FanDuel slate will probably dramatically reshape, and it will become Starsy Scrubsy with emergent value, and you'll want cheap guys, and you'll be able to pay up for like 3 stars in all these lineups. And it'll look totally different about an hour from now. But we'll see. That's what we're looking like there. Let me jump to the DraftKings board for you guys. Now, DraftKings, I feel like we were getting a lot more stars and scrubs, at least as we were running through those results. Our top lineups here, you have either Luka or Jokic in there. A lot of Vooch coming through. Klingon, obviously, is a value play. You can see the Obi shares coming up still quite a bit. Again, keep an eye on that. You can kind of judge it by whether he's in the starting lineup or not. If he's not, I might knock it from 26 to 24 just by default. And you could easily go as low as 22. But that true range is probably 22 to 26, something like that. Maybe even 28. Decent amount of Trey Jones visible there as a value play on or a mid-board value on DraftKings. Same deal with Kevin Huerter, who we talked about. But yeah, this board looks very, very tight to our results. Obviously, these are the best 20 performers in what created the results we were looking at. But that top 20 just totally jived with everything we said about this slate. Going back to your question, though, Doug, where you were talking about, I know you were saying it had to be center, but like with the way the board's shaped here, I do think you could play that Luka Doncic game in your util spot, considering how much those two came up in that spot as far as how these lineups are constructed. Like, look at all the Luka that we're getting through there. And obviously that's a lot of Jokic shares there as well. Some Jokic is going through the center spot, but you're getting a fair amount of Klingon or Vooch through there. And right here, you've got Klingon 3 times with Luka or Jokic. So I do think there's a viable way that you could still play that. I'm concerned about Jokic. Let me have the swap ability to Luka if you do it through the util spot. Starting 5 is a different format. I missed that you were playing a different format. There you go. Cujo, what's going on, buddy? Power says Misi and Kelly O are both in. Zion is a game time decision. Appreciate that. So 626. Again, I'll scroll slowly through these so you guys can grab some inspiration. Again, this is acemind.io. It's been a minute since I've had the interface up on the site here. So as you scroll over, you can export all these results, which is usually how I do it. That way I can copy paste directly into my lineup upload, and you get all this data with it. So I just pop filters on there, and then I'm sorting by my lineup score, which is you can give it parameters for how you want it to weight ROI, win percentage, average cash won, and ownership, and a couple other things. And that creates your lineup score, which is somewhere back here. There it is. The columns are in different order. On the export, it's a little further up. But you sort by lineup score, and it gives you that based on your inputs. Or you can just go somewhere over here if you're in a super hurry and just like sort by average cash won. Kind of what we're looking for anyway. And those lineups, depending on how you set it, that's going to be very much in line with one another anyway. But our top lineup there was coming back with about $150 against the $5 entry every time. It's not bad. Trey Jones, Devin Booker, Justin Champagnie, Obi Toppin, Donovan Klingon, Tyus Jones, Ryan Dunn, and Luka. We've got a couple higher projected lineups down here that didn't quite perform as well, but higher raw projections, obviously. But you can see the interplay, right? This 281-point projection played up just as strongly as some of these others. So on the front side, more to the point, look at that 263. Holy shit. Sometimes you get little wacky results in here like that, though, if you're going by just average cash one, because a weird lineup like that might spike 1 or 2 gigantic results through the 50,000 sims. Or, excuse me, the 150,000 sims. And that could skew the average a little bit, which is why I like to go by, the ROI, the average cash one. And then you can go by other things. Win rate is in here. Win rate gets a little bit tight as a sorting tool because you get a lot of commonality. You can't really tell the difference between any of those 0.08s. And as you go down the board, you get more like 0.06s, a ton of 0.05s. So it's not really great because there's not a lot of interplay to tell you which of those lineups are better. Top 1% is a little bit better for that because you get more refined results. And I think you can chase by top 1% while at the same time having all your best win percentage lineups in there is still a good idea. But very powerful tools over at AceMind. And again, very affordable, especially as compared to some of those prices that I was recently exposed to and significantly surprised by. I knew they were high. I didn't know they were quite that high. Let me throw this back up on the board real quick. Make sure that nobody to clean up down the bottom of the board here that we didn't talk about. Mix and match shares of Tari Eason at 15% FanDuel. Mix and match shares of Josh Hart, 12% FanDuel. Again, just guys that are kind of carrying through in the 8s. That's an expensive price for Josh Hart, but not necessarily with Jalen Brunson out. But again, adding the multiple layers of factors that we have to work with, that grindy low total game against Miami knocks it back down. So it kind of zeroes it back out to just, Zooey is kind of a spot at 8,000 for Josh Hart. I'll have some, but I'm not going to go chase it. 6% of Zion if he plays, 6% of Aaron Nesmith, who could look better, could look worse, depending on who's in, who's out. KD at 10%. It's right around where we had Booker. Either one of those guys, both of those guys, or neither of those guys, perfectly fine. Alex Sarr, 14% FanDuel. Really, again, just mix and match shares of those guys, onesie, twosie types of any of those guys on DraftKings. But you've got very good players in there. You've got Zion. You've got KD. You've got Sarr, Josh Hart, Malik Beasley, who has been coming up a little bit for us. Got the minutes knocked down at 26. He played nearly 28 the other day. Put up a 17. That's a Malik Beasley game. That is what we hate him for. What we love him for is the days where 6 of those threes go down, and he lights up the board a little bit. Jimmy Butler, 8% FanDuel, 3% DraftKings. Is who he is, spot 7,900, 7,700. Not in love with it. We're below the field on both sites. I think you can go away from it, but if you have a few shares in your pocket, you're fine. It's Jimmy Butler. Ricky Council, 12% here, non-priority. 3%, I forgot to take the 4th off of his name. Keldon on DraftKings, you guys, is a 3%er. The board cut very quickly to single digits among the centers and forwards. Got a lot of weight up there. Aaron Gordon at 6%. If you lose those, you've got a lot of easy options around $5,100. Sohan is essentially the same play. $5,000 O-Rob is a reasonable alternative. $5,000, that is Aaron Gordon. $5,000 Keldon is a reasonable alternative. So again, this is the same situation as what I highlighted with the guards. You've got those pockets of similarly priced, with the exception of Ryan Dunn in there. Everybody in the 5s, the 6s in this range. There's a lot of swappability back and forth between those plays. So if somebody gets overly popular, or if value emerges on something and you need to get cheaper on any given share, perfectly fine. If you've got a lean on any of those guys and you want to build up a position, do it at the expense of these other mediocre guys around that territory. Don't just be like, I'm going to take half the shares that were supposed to go here and put them here. No, take the shares out of here and put them there. Take the shares out of here and put them there. And now you've built a plus position. I think that's about it. We've covered every interesting wrinkle I can think of on this slate. And we had Gillespie, not Gill. Gillespie was on the board. Oh, I got to resort the positions. I know I said his name really quickly before. There he is. And no shares on FanDuel. 6% on DraftKings. Just 3,000. I threw him 19 minutes. He played just under 24 in the last game, to Doug's point and Cujo's point. Pretty fragile, but at the dead min price, even if you get him, 16 minutes there, it's not completely shot in the foot. You're talking about a 1.06 DraftKings per minute guy. So if we're taking 3 minutes off of that, and you're calling it, call it like 15. You're still at a 5. You want 5.5, obviously. It's not a good situation. But even with some fragility, at the min price, I think that's a loose dart for large field tournaments. It's not something I would go chase. It's in no means a priority play or a cash game play or anything like that. But as a tournament dart, sure. I will say again, though, it's not really shaped that way slate-wise, where you need to go down to a dead min price guy. Now, granted, if you took him and plunked him in any given guard spot over Johnny Juzang, let's say, you're saving $600 there. You're sacrificing probably some stability, higher projection, et cetera, but you do get that $600. If that $600 buys you something significant, then it's viable. But it's not as strong, at least in the shape of the slate that we came into the show with. And I'll have to get on the horse and start updating things real quick here. But it's not that kind of a slate where we need that dead min guy necessarily. At least not yet. Duck says, am I a fool for having O-Rob and Klingon as my most owned centers on FanDuel and DK? No, I don't think so. The sim certainly doesn't think so. I would say that Klingon is the better of the two and came out that way. But we got 20+% on both sides of Klingon. And we've got a relevant O-Rob. It's just with all the Vooch that we got to, O-Rob got boxed out of some shares that he's probably entitled to. 5-5 is way above our value threshold on FanDuel. So totally fine over there. 5-9, same story on DraftKings. At 5,000, he's perfectly playable. So no issues with either of those guys. No issues with having those guys as like your most highly owned centers. It's just the fact that you're leaving Jokic on the table if you're doing that, at least in some shares, and you're leaving Vooch, who I think looks absolutely tremendous today, on the table in some of those. But otherwise, those are outside, from a step down in talent, obviously major step down from Jokic to Vooch. And then if you're coming off of Vooch, those are your next two men up in terms of the center position in my mind. And we actually did get less in the raw sense of Jokic across the board. Just depends on the nature of the lineups that you're building. But that is, as I said, this is a slate with many, many paths through the woods. And I think either of those is a legitimate starting point. So I'm with you. I don't think it's crazy. With that in mind, you guys, hour 20 in, we're past the 6:30 mark. 7:30 start for this slate, but there's only one game at 7:30. I'm going to do my best to make that baseball show that I'm going to jump on for at 8:15. If it doesn't happen then, look for it in the 10 o'clock hour. But I'm going to try and make it happen at 8:15. We'll see as far as all this NBA stuff to keep on top of. But you guys out there absolutely rock. Appreciate every single one of you, all the likes, subscriptions. Check out rotoscouts.com. Check out acemind.io. We'll see you back here for baseball in a little bit or at some point during the evening. Projections for baseball will be up on the site. Updates for basketball throughout the evening. We'll be on top of everything. Good luck out there tonight, gang. Somebody go win something. Share a screenshot when you do. And we'll see you in a little bit. Later.